Welcome to the 1980s movie graveyard, the show that lets forgotten movies have one last chance to shine. Now sit back and relax, enjoy the show.
Hello, retro movie lovers, and welcome back to the movie graveyard. We got some good, we're putting the shovels down. We're not going to fully exhume a particular film today, but we're going to kind of dig around. I got Trev here. Trev, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Goat. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, we're just going to take the shovels and just do one quick little stab into the graves.
Yeah.
We're just going to test the
grave diggers need breaks too, you know?
Exactly. We thought we would bring you guys a slightly different topic today. One, surprisingly, I can't believe we haven't done yet, but it makes total sense to do a show of this type.
Yeah, it's funny because we're saying it's like a break for us, but for the listeners, it might be more work because, you know, a typical episode, they're like, oh, that's one episode or that's one movie I can go check out. We're going to give them a bunch today.
That's right. So these are some good recommendations, and maybe it's good to do a show like this because movie watching does seem to be up in this day and age. So you never know; we could be giving some good recommendations here.
What else is there to do? You know?
Exactly. Watch sport. Oh wait, no, never mind. By the way, Trev, I know you're excited for that NBA to come back in a couple of weeks. Hopefully, the other 50% of the league doesn't test positive before they can tip off.
Yeah.
They can't even get into what they call it, the Disney bubble, where they're going to safely play all the basketball games. The problem is everybody at the individual practice facilities, they already got corona. So
yeah, I'm really excited for movies to start production again, and instantly get shut down in week one when one crew member gets COVID-19.
I like how people are come up with rules like you stand here and this person stands here, and then you put the thing on the table here and nobody touches it here, and the cameraman must be X amount away with a mobile remote video assist. It's just no, it's going to be gone in a day.
Or else we're going to end up with a lot of movies with a lot of wide angle lenses, very far away cinematography.
You know how to save money, around the time, whatever it was, 10, 12 years ago, when Paranormal Activity came out, and it was found footage, it's so economical. Now there's going to be movies about spying on people where it's two people 30 feet apart having a conversation in a desert, and the whole movie is just a guy out there with a telescope. That would be the gimmicks they build in.
Mm-hmm.
So
this is a good time for Gus Van Sant to get his Jerry franchise back.
Oh God, you know that is kind of funny because as we all know, the drive-in scene is a little more vibrant now than it has been in summers past. But Gus Van Sant, he can totally, people. It's funny how 3 or 4 years ago people were let the drive-ins die when they all had to be forced to convert to digital. They're like, whatever, it's a relic of the past. Let it die. Movie theaters, who cares? We got streaming, and now I feel like people got so much damn streaming coming outside their ears, they can't wait to go to the drive-in again.
Yeah, if there's any silver lining on this, and there's not many, but the return of the drive-in in a big way this summer has been a pretty cool story.
Yeah, I want to dive into the topic here, but I love the topic of quarantine watches. So, Trev, do you have just one recent quarantine watch that you did that was interesting?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to spring that on me. Let me see. You know what? I have that handy Letterboxd account, which I can go take a look at. And
can you plug that? Can you plug that? Is there a way that they can look up your particular letterbox to read your
Sure,
shit?
You can just look up Trevor Snyder on Letterboxd, or I think, it's just my regular name on there, Trevor Snyder. Feel free to follow me if you want to see my reviews or whatever. I don't know why anyone would, but
it's interesting. I was gonna say, I don't know how you get to it though, because I just get to it because obviously we're Facebook friends. I don't have to do the www dots and all that because I'm special.
No, it's
I got it like that.
Letterboxd.com, but box with no e, so it's just BOXD.
Yeah, it's a weird
but
site.
It's a cool site. I would recommend it for people if they don't know about it. It allows you to catalog and rate and maybe review if you want, write a review for every movie you watch throughout the year. It's very handy for me at the end of the year to just remind myself of what I saw when I want to make my year-end lists and things like that. And of course you can create a watch list of things you want to see but yeah, in terms of things I've recently watched, I mean, the one I'll give the biggest shout out to, I don't know if you've heard anything about this, Goat, speaking of things that were released to drive-ins and getting a little bit more attention just because of a landscape where there's less big movies to compete with, was The Vast of Night. Have you heard of this?
No.
So this is a new indie sci-fi film from a director named Andrew Patterson. who I believe he co-wrote it and directed it. It's his first feature. And it takes place in like the 1950s, and it's basically like a War of the Worlds kind of riff, where it's this small New Mexico town, and it's about these two teenagers, one of whom is like works at the local radio station, and the other one who is like the phone operator in the town. And one night where like everybody in town is at the local high school basketball game, he's doing his radio broadcast, and she's not operating the phones, and she hears this like mysterious signal kind of like interrupt his radio broadcast. She calls him and tells him, hey, there was some kind of strange sound. I recorded it. You want me to play it for you? He's like, yeah, of course, because they're both really interested in like audio things. And they decide to like play the sound on the radio and ask if anyone knows what it is. And then somebody calls it and says, well, I know what it was. I worked in the military, and we had to go somewhere and kind of, we were burying this, what seemed to be a spaceship. And we heard that sound. It sounded just like that. So that sets off this chain of events. And it's one of those, it's like, it all takes place in this one night. It's all about, what's going on in this town. Why is this strange alien signal? The storyline is nothing you haven't seen before, but why this movie is getting a lot of attention and why I loved it and why I'll heavily recommend it is just the filmmaking is just so assured. And it's, it's a movie that's, the dialogue is like really, on target with like making these teens likable and sound like period realistic. There's this amazing tracking shot that kind of goes through the entire town. So he actually filmed this, and he found this like small Texas town. I think it was Texas, even though the movie's in New Mexico. He found this small town. He actually got all the residents of the town to kind of get involved and act as his crew, since it's a very low budget movie. And this town like looks very old fashioned. So he's got this one shot where he basically hooked up cameras to like little remote control cars and stuff, and it runs throughout the entire town. A lot of the tension and mood of the film is played off of just the audio and sound, because like I said, it's a lot of them just listening to recordings and talking to people on the phone. But it's actually, there's moments that are really chilling. You really get pulled into the story. So yeah, like in terms of just like that kind of first feature where you watch it and go, man, I'm really going to pay attention to this director now. This is definitely one of those, and you can watch it for free on Amazon Prime. Amazon ended up snagging it up, and it's on there.
Nice.
But it also had a release this year. I know it played at some drive-ins a few months ago. So
that actually sounds right up my alley, actually, because I kind of got suckered in. I don't know if I had told you this, Trev, but I started watching that new War of the Worlds show. And,
how is that?
I believe I'm 7 episodes in, and the first 4 I was digging the hell out of it. Mm-hmm. And then the last 2, I feel like I hit a road bump. All of a sudden, it's less about the machinations of this alien invasion that they're trying to explain. Because it's really good, though, in terms of, it's like a national cast. Like part of it follows, basically, French special forces who are kind of, guarding this one of the few scientists left who kind of understands what's going on. And then you have a whole other side story where you have Gabriel Burns as a more medical guy who's researching the biology of the aliens and what's going on. But I mean, I was like, man, you want to talk about rock hard boners, I was all about this show. And then these last 2 episodes, there was hit a roadblock, and I hope it can recover, but it just we got into some weird incest storylines. Okay. And then after that episode, the second one was all about because there's certain people because there's constantly, I guess you could say, a transmission that's going on, that the way the aliens are communicating, or however they're still figuring out. But there's a blind girl who can see again, and she understands the transmission, and she's kind of on the same wavelength as the aliens. And now there's this very kind of dark side, evilish child. Well, he's not a child. He's 15, 16 years old, but he was a product of incest, and he's also on the aliens' wavelength. And I think I got about 3 episodes left of this first season. I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm hoping it can recover and be as strong as the first few episodes, but it went from being a strong recommend to these last 2 episodes. I don't know where the hell it's going.
I mean, ever since Game of Thrones, you got to have incest in your show.
You gotta have incest. You gotta,
Yeah, no, there's a little nice, because Vast of Night is so clearly War of the Worlds inspired, there's even a nice little Easter egg where the radio station he works at, the call letters are WOTW.
Oh, nice.
So I thought that was a nice little touch, yeah. And then the other thing just for this kind of, the audience of this show, I believe they'd appreciate it. Some of them probably have already checked this out. Keeping to Amazon Prime, things you can watch on there. There's a pretty good documentary on there, Goat. I don't know if you've checked it out yet, called In Search of the Last Action Heroes.
No.
Yeah, it's a documentary that actually kind of goes through and tracks like the evolution of the American action film. Not even American, but just kind of like it mostly covers like American, but it kind of goes global too. But it's just tracking the action genre, and then like it kind of really flies through the early history of the action genre, and then it really digs its heels in and concentrates primarily on the 80s and early 90s action run, and kind of goes through. And I was pretty impressed. Like you could say that maybe it's a little longer than it needs to be because I think it's a little over 2 hours, but it really does cover kind of every big action movie and every big action star you can think of. And I was really excited to see it even has like a little section on Cynthia Rothrock, like it gives props where props are due. Goes into people like Michael Dudikoff, and then near the end, like Scott Adkins is one of the people featured in it like heavily, and so of course not only is he being interviewed, but it also gets to like his modern contributions to the genre. But it's the kind of thing I know would be right up your alley, Goat, because it's just like covering all the films we like. And I was surprised at how, I guess from what I understand, this is a documentary that was kind of crowdsourced. But I was impressed with the amount of like talking heads they actually got for it. None of like the giant stars, but I mean Shane Black is in there, and like I said, Scott Adkins is in there. Cynthia Rothrock shows up. A lot of cool people. Vernon Wells is in there talking about both the Road Warrior and being the bad guy in Commando. So yeah, there's some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, that actually sounds cool. Yeah, Atkins is a guy I was championing for a long time, and
and I don't know too much about it. Like I'm ashamed to admit that like he's kind of like a weird blank spot for me. I mean, obviously I saw him in Expendables 2, and I've caught little bits and pieces of his stuff, but he comes across as so likable in this. And then I ended up watching some other stuff with him on YouTube, and I was like, yeah, I do want to kind of check this guy out more just because he seems like someone worth supporting.
Yeah, for sure. And there's usually a couple of his movies at all times streaming on Netflix if anybody wants to look up Atkins on there. I won't say his movies are like hit or miss because I haven't seen a ton of them. I've seen maybe 6 of his flicks, and they're all good quality that I saw. Like he's not, he's in that direct-to-video world, but he's a cut above some of the really like his movies are pretty good for what they are. But I know exactly what you mean about the personality. Like I have to keep watching his flicks, but I don't think there's been one that I've seen at least that really capitalized. Like they usually kind of cast him very strongly in the kind of silent stoic type, and I really don't know why, because there's a lot more there personality wise,
Yeah, I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head. You might know. I know he did one. I believe he wrote it too. I heard it was like a little bit more like a comedic action, and people really seem to like that one. That was the one I wanted to check out. It's escaping me now, but
was it Gringo or El Gringo?
No, I'm sure I could find it.
I know that was a semi-popular one of his, like maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But yeah, I would recommend it. I mean, they're definitely straight up like almost canon style flicks, but I would definitely recommend at least his 2 ninja flicks. It's literally just called Ninja, and then I think Ninja 2. Yeah. Those are good. Yeah. It's very stylistically bizarre, but with like lots of flash, like literally there's like a 12-minute flash scene in it. But he did a Universal Soldier movie, which was kind of interesting to see him go against Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren. That was kind of a bizarre and interesting movie. I still haven't seen his Hard Target 2, which I definitely want to check out. He did one of his kind of first breakthrough ones I want to say, I could be wrong about this. I want to say it was called Assassination Games, but I could be wrong. But there's one early on where it's like dueling assassins going at each other with him and Van Damme as well. That was pretty damn decent. But yeah. And
the one I'm talking about is called Accident Man.
Okay, I've heard of that, but yeah, I haven't seen it.
I'm looking at it now, and I mean, I would definitely check it out. It's Scott Adkins, Ray Stevenson, Michael J. White, Ray Park, David Paymer. I don't know what Dave Paymer's doing there, but and Ashley Greene. So I mean, a decent cast for that size movie, I suppose.
And he has done some, without like looking it up and stuff, he has done some stunt work for major stars. Like I know it's a movie that people don't really like, but I think the best scene of it, kind of, if you watch the end of X-Men Origins Wolverine, and they have the weird Deadpool that's like Ryan Reynolds with his face sewn up. You know what I'm talking about, Trev? Mm-hmm. Yeah. The actual action in those scenes is mostly Scott Adkins. So
okay, yeah.
But for sure, I'll always take a second to plug Scott Adkins. I got a wacky quarantine watch, Trev, and I hope you've seen this. This was a storied, kind of fabled movie from the early 90s days of reading Fangoria, and I never was able to see it. And then, like, I finally caught it this past week, the last week of June, talking about Highway to Hell. Have you seen this, Trev?
Oh, yeah, yes. I loved Highway to Hell back in the day. That was I used to like. That was definitely a movie that was always on cable late at night.
Yeah.
And I would catch it a lot back then. So.
Yeah, I caught it.
I haven't seen it since I was like a teenager, though.
Yeah.
So I don't know what I would think now. Like, but I would definitely be willing to sit down and check it out again.
Well, I always knew this to be a shelved movie because it was for a few years. It took a few years to come out on video, and I just, for some reason, never came across it like on VHS. But I'm kind of glad that I got to see it on cable and HD because it actually is to me, to my eyes, for this type of movie, it seemed very expensive. Like they constantly go to a lot of different locations in the desert, and my favorite is like for people who don't know, it's basically like Chad Lowe, which is Rob Lowe's younger brother, I think. Well, he is his brother, but I don't know who's older. Chad Lowe's probably younger, don't you think?
I would assume so. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's in it with Christy Swanson, and like they're he's like a shitty pizza delivery boy, and they're trying to drive to Las Vegas so they can elope, but they go onto the highway to hell, which is literally like if you drive past. Well, actually, it's not even if you drive. If you stop in between this section between like I don't know exactly how many miles it is, but it's like you pass this one tree, but you can't stop until you pass the other Joshua tree. But if you do stop, the highway to hell will open up, and the evil necromancer, satanic cop will come get you and kidnap your pretty woman, which is what happens here with Christy Swanson. And so Chad Lowe goes on like a weird odyssey throughout. It's literally hell, but it's almost like an alternate dimension. And there's like, it's kind of funny because there's all these like weird like businesses that he stops at and shit, and like just these weird wacky characters that inhabit hell. And my favorite, Trev, was when he goes to the diner, and it's like all the zombie cops are there, and one of the zombie cops is played by none other than Jerry Stiller, and then you have his wife Ann Mira playing the waitress, and you get a very young, very green Ben Stiller playing the short order cook who's like frying all these eggs and shit out on the sidewalk. It's very bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
But if you need it seems to like keep jumping from cable channel to cable channel. So if anybody out there has cable or satellite and has any movie channels, check it to see if it's playing Highway to Hell. I would recommend it for a good laugh for sure. I'm glad I finally got to see it.
Yeah, I remember there being like other like I know like Gilbert Gottfried was Hitler in there.
Yeah.
And I remember. I know you're talking about. I remember the time too when it was around. Like Fangoria was really pushing Hell Cop as like the new like Freddy horror icon, right? Yeah, and of course that did not go anywhere. But I'm looking at it now and I saw that I didn't even realize that Hell Cop is played by C.J. Graham, who played Jason in my favorite Friday the 13th movie, Part 6.
Yep.
And interesting enough, Highway to Hell written by Brian Helgeland.
Yep. His early days.
Yeah. And that's an obvious jump from that to L.A. Confidential and Mystic River, I suppose.
Hey, I'll give him credit. He got real better real fast. So yeah. So we'll go ahead and roll into the feature presentation tonight. We thought it might be fun. We each picked 5. We're focusing on the decade of the 80s, but we're like 5 forgotten films. These might have been films that you remember from cable or your youth, but they just aren't movies that are really like talked about much nowadays. Wouldn't you say that's fair to say, Trev?
Yeah, this is a topic I'm kind of fascinated by. So like in recent months in particular, like one of my favorite things to do is just choose like a really notable actor, typically older actors, not like someone who, not like a Chris Hemsworth or something, but someone like an Elliot Gould, for instance. We all know like the classic Elliot Gould films, but you kind of forget that guy made a lot of movies, right? And you go into his IMDb and there's so many films you've never even heard of. That to me is like so fascinating because obviously even today, a lot of movies get made that we never hear of. But those are usually like little small indie films, the ones that are just kind of made to just be dumped onto Walmart shelves for like a month, and it's clearly like a little tax shelter thing for someone. I always find it fascinating that there's so many studio films where, a lot of people poured a lot of work into this. It came out, obviously, probably every newspaper in America wrote a review of it. It had its little moment, and then it just kind of goes away. And like, so those movies are like kind of fascinating to me. These movies that just vanish from the ether. And so you and I were talking, and there's the kind of movies we would like to do full commentaries for, and these are the kind of movies that we don't know we'd ever sit down. Some of these are really hard to see, That's kind of part of the reason I want to do this too, just to draw back attention to them. But they're not necessarily the kind of films we want to spend 90 minutes talking about, but we just kind of want to remind people they exist and say, hey, remember this? And wouldn't it be cool to get a little bit more eyes back onto this one?
Yeah, break out the member berries.
Mm-hmm.
So did you want to go first, Trev?
Yeah, I can start. I'll actually start with one that is probably going to be like a strange outlier in the rest of these. So that's why I want to kind of get it out of the way. And it's one that is definitely not the kind of film I think you and I would ever do like a commentary for. And I'm sure it's out of all the ones I'm going to talk about, at least, I think with yours too, the typical listener of the show might be like, why is Trevor talking about this? But give it a chance. It's a movie called Half Moon Street from 1986. Goat, are you familiar with this one?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay, so this is it's as Wikipedia calls it, a British American erotic thriller.
Oh wow!
But it's directed by Bob Swaim, and it stars Sigourney Weaver and Michael Caine. And what this is it's based on a novel by Paul Theroux, who's a pretty noted novelist. The novel is actually, so I guess he wrote a book called Half Moon Street. But the thing is, that was like 2 novellas, and both novellas were about different characters who live on Half Moon Street. And this movie is actually only an adaptation of one of the novellas. And that novella was called Dr. Slaughter, which is such a better title. I wish they'd run with it.
Yeah, you think for business reasons it would have done better.
And it's like a literal title because Sigourney Weaver plays a character named Dr. Lauren Slaughter. So she's this American academic who's living in London now. And she works for this think tank in London. She's an expert on China, so she kind of helps them discuss like Chinese affairs and things. But she's just really unhappy there. All the men take credit for everything she does. She's having a really hard time kind of going up the ranks, so sexism alive and well. And she ends up being somebody she knows ends up sending her a videotape of this news story on kind of like on high-end escorts. And she finds this like very intriguing, and she decides to look into it. And she ends up meeting the guy who runs this high-end escort service, and she talks to him, and she agrees to become an escort. And this is why I'm kind of highlighting this movie. So like the general plot of the movie is she becomes this escort, and she does it with this kind of rule where she'll go on the dates with the men, but she gets to decide if they have sex or not. Like that's completely in her power. And sometimes she does, and sometimes she doesn't. It's so it's a very like for 1986 in particular, it's a very like she's a very empowered character, and it's a very pro sex worker movie at a time where you didn't see that very often.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like they would have had to file this movie back in the day at the video store under science fiction.
Yeah. But that's what's cool about it. It's like, it's nice to see a movie back then, that was like saying like, yes, the women can do this, and they can still be powerful and kind of be in charge of their sexuality. So one of her escorts ends up being Michael Caine, who kind of gives a fake name, but because she's already involved in like the political world, she instantly recognizes him as he's actually a House of Lords member. And she right away tells him she recognizes him, and they just end up getting to talking. And even though she's technically his client, they end up actually kind of falling for each other and start a real relationship. The only thing being because of how they met and because of what she is, he can't tell anyone about her, so he has to keep it a secret. And then throughout the course of the film, it turns out that he's actually currently involved in these really delicate peace negotiations with the Middle East. He's trying to finally bring peace between Israel and Palestine. And obviously there are people who don't want that to happen, and in them trying to prevent it from happening, they kind of do some, looking into him and discover that he might have this, weak spot in this escort he's seeing. And so in the last like 15 minutes or so, it actually suddenly becomes kind of more of a thriller, even has some like action to it that really is jarring when it happens.
Yeah.
And that's not even like why I'm recommending the movie, because really what ultimately sells this movie for me is I'm sure some people watch this and be like, I don't know, it's just kind of slow relationship movie. But I think you really like Sigourney Weaver and Michael Caine in this. She's really likable. He's likable. Their chemistry is really strong. And even I could have watched this movie even without like the thriller aspect at the end. I just think watching the relationship develop, and like I said, just seeing like a movie with this subject matter of this time. And I also say there's a lot of Sigourney Weaver nudity in this.
Oh, wow.
And I know it's like not that I want to turn this into a show about discussing women and their looks and everything, but I know like Sigourney Weaver is like one of those that sometimes it's divisive on whether she's a sexy woman or not. I myself always have thought she's very attractive, and this movie like really seals the deal on that, because it's not just for the nudity, but just for how in charge of her sexuality she is, and just the kind of power of the character she's playing. So I really like her character in this, and like I said, and she's called Dr. Slaughter, even though it's not sounds like she should be a slasher or something. But the name is just so cool, and like what she's doing is like interesting. So yeah, it's a neat one to check out.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with the type of characters she plays and how those characters are presented. But I think if you need to have any doubt about Sigourney Weaver's sex appeal, check out the last 10 minutes of Alien, where she gets into the the suit. Check out Galaxy Quest, and check out that movie Heartbreakers with Gene Hackman.
Or the last 10 or 15 minutes of Ghostbusters as well.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, when who was it? Zool takes over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There. I mean, that was like bam in your face right there. So
yeah.
And
I believe. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say it's funny how you described it. How it kind of turns into like some little bit of action at the end. Is I feel like that was a pure '80s move, because I've had that happen to me with a lot of '80s movies where they have to get some obligatory tension and chasing and action going just to sell the trailer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's funny too, because if you even look at like some of the posters for it, it really just looks like, I bet most people walked into the theater just expecting it to be this kind of like relationship drama, and then the last 10 minutes kind of suddenly bats you over the head with something else. But it works well enough.
Yeah, I want to check it out, because that's a powerhouse duo of actors right there. Alrighty, for my number one pick, I feel like this was a movie that like really slid under the radar of the time that it was released. It probably got some play on cable. The DVD came, even the Blu-ray came a couple years ago with very little fanfare. Like, I never heard anybody talk about this movie, but I just remember it kind of very vaguely from like HBO, Showtime, whatever days back in the day. But and this was a recent, I think the beginning of quarantine watches for me. But I took another look at it and I rediscovered the movie Cherry 2000. You ever see this, Trev?
A long time ago. It's funny because when you showed me that was one of the ones you're thinking about, I really want to go back and revisit it now.
Yeah, I really think you should. Basically, for
it's interesting too. I just saw it's produced by Edward R. Pressman, who also produced Half Moon Street.
Yeah,
Pressman's all over the 80s. But
if I'm not misremembered, I think Pressman also did Christmas Evil. I think.
Probably.
But yeah, he does some good sleazy flicks back in the day. But this one, it's kind of weird because as 80s as this is, and how it's almost like a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek, almost like throwback to some 50s sci-fi too. It's kind of in a weird way, like more topical now than ever. So you basically have, and I think maybe this is one of those things too, Trev, where like they, like even to this day, they never knew exactly how to sell this movie. But it's very weird and off-ball. So basically you have this guy who they kind of set up, he's an office worker guy, whatever, doing fairly well for himself, I suppose. And he kind of sets up in the beginning that dating and relationships between men and women, this takes place in like an undisclosed future. So the beginning, like when they show the city, it's clearly futuristic. But dating between men and women has become like very litigious, and it's a very hard process. Like there's literally like contracts. Like he goes with his friends to a singles bar, and like there's like literally lawyers and shit there drawing up contacts for men and women to go on a date and have sex. Like it's very bizarre. So he doesn't want any part of that. So what he does is he has his own wife at home, his Cherry 2000, who's actually a sex robot, Trev. And it seems very very convincing, very lifelike. I mean, it's played by a real woman. It's not like a blow-up doll or anything that he's with. But, she seems like she cooks dinner, she cleans the house, whatever, and they have a very, deep, romantic, it's almost like in a way that movie Her with Joaquin Phoenix. Like, he's legitimately 1,000% in love with this robot. So one night while they're having, like, a romantic tryst, the dishwasher overflows and they're passionately, getting ready to make love, kissing, whatever, on the floor, and the water comes out on the floor, and unfortunately it shorts out his robot, his Cherry 2000, and he goes to the robot repair guy, and unfortunately you can't get parts anymore. So I mean, he could get it, and the guy's trying to sell him on a new sex robot, but he doesn't want it. This man is heart and soul in love with Cherry 2000, so he hires a bounty hunter, played by the awesome Melanie Griffith, who, like, I think Melanie Griffith in general is kind of underrated, but I think this is probably, like, one of her most underrated roles. She plays this cool bounty hunter. I think her name is Red, because she has red hair, and she has this cool late 60s, early 70s Mustang, I think it is. So she's going to be his guide and take him through the wasteland, because there's, like, this mythic place of that's been abandoned out in the middle of the desert, like a warehouse of robot parts and replacement robots and whatever. So he has like the brain of his robot, but he has to put it into a new robot's body. But he wants to find the exact same body that looks the same, everything. So like, without giving too much away, it's just kind of this wacky, like it has a very like Wild West vibe to it too, because they go out in like the wasteland, and there's a really cool action scene with some guys in a crane, and they pick up the Mustang, and like they're hanging outside the Mustang, probably hanging out of this car 100 feet off the ground, shooting Uzis and stuff, like, and then finally they get dropped into like this reservoir. Like there's some really cool shit. But there's some great, like, cameo stuff, too. Like, you have the good old cowboy Ben Johnson is, like, a guy that they meet who lives in, like, this little mine that's, like, stockpiled of old toasters and TVs and shit. Our boy, Tim Thomerson, he leads this, it's not exactly like a cult, but it's like a colony, I guess you could say, of this, like, it's almost like a big fancy hotel, but it's these little, like, individual huts and stuff. And, like, he's pretty much, like, laying down the law out in this wasteland and all this shit. And the main character, he has to kind of stay there and humor him because he gets separated from Red, and like he kind of like, it's one of those journeys where like he meets this badass woman in order, he's just dying whatever to get his sex robot back, but he's kind of a nerd, so he kind of like being around this woman and the shit they get into, he kind of becomes like a more ballsy hero in his own way. That's always fun to watch, and it's just a great chase movie, and I won't spoil it, but there's a really cool end sequence when they finally get to the robot wasteland, which is kind of like almost like I think it's like in a casino that's been like Trev like blown over with sand and stuff. Dude, it looks exactly like, you remember that one Resident Evil Extinction movie where they went to Las Vegas and the casinos were all under sand and shit? It looks exactly like that. Like I totally feel W.S. Anderson stole that from Cherry 2000, but yeah, man, like you're gonna love Melanie Griffith, and like, I mean, I don't think this is like a spoiler, but obviously there's romantic tension between the male lead and Melanie Griffith.
Right. Well, it's funny, like what your memory does to you, right? Because I was obviously very young when I saw this on cable. Yeah. And I don't remember anything about it being about like a sex bot or anything. All I remember is Melanie Griffith. Like I remember her being like, because I think even when I was a kid, and like I would see this on the video shelf, I just always assumed like she was Cherry 2000, right? Because she's like obviously like on the poster and everything, and but I remember like I have memories of watching just like those scenes in like the wasteland with her. And I think you and I have talked about it before, but I mean, it doesn't get much hotter than like Melanie Griffith in the 80s. No. Yeah. So. Just.
And this one, I mean, I really think, like, when you look at the way her hair is cut and the outfit she wears and stuff, like, I mean, I think this movie was more influential on, like, the directors that saw it as, like, probably, kids or teens than probably just a general audience, because, like, there's so much to her visual look. Reminds me of Mila in The Fifth Element. And then also, too, it's like she kind of has, like, I don't know, it's like she kind of has, like, that badass thing that, like, Mila also did in the Resident Evil movies, in just the wasteland setting and shit. I mean, I don't know, it's just a really good B movie that, like, like, it's weird. And I'll be honest, I know I did see it, I always remembered it as a weird movie. Like, I was not really into it because I didn't really, like, as a kid, I didn't really get what it was about or, like, what was cool about it. But, like, being older and being a fan of, like, I guess you can't really call it a post-apocalyptic movie, even though it really is. They spend, like, probably 80% of the movie in the wasteland. But there is, like, a regular functioning society. It's just that they're out in these deserts and shit, like, kind of the government or whoever has just let it go into shit and let it be lawless. But just a lot of fun. And, like, you're going to fall in love for sure with Melanie Griffith here. With, like, not only with, like, obviously how, great she is, as a leading lady, but just also how cool she is. Like, it's one of those few movies where it's like, don't get me wrong, Trev, I'm all about the female heroes. I love the female heroes. I love, hell, I'm the guy who even has the Blu-ray of Ultraviolet. You know what I'm saying? But sometimes it's a little forced. It's a little whatever. So that, like, to me, like this, like Red from this movie, Melanie Griffith, she belongs on the true, the wall of the Hall of Fame of female action heroes and stuff, So I can't recommend this movie highly enough. I need to track down the blue of it before it goes out of print, because it's definitely one I want to be able to watch, over and over as the years go by.
Yeah, I'm looking at like so I guess I'm just trying to jog my memory again. It's not too much is coming back to me, but just looking at like screen grabs and just knowing now what you said what it's about, and then the Melanie Griffith character, I feel like it would be maybe a good double bill with Tank Girl. I feel like it's kind of got like that sort of vibe to it.
It's very much got that vibe to it. Obviously it doesn't have like all the weird like creatures and shit in it.
Yeah.
But the wacky group of people that they meet, throughout going through the desert and shit. And there's a cool part where they're kind of like in like a western town, where he first meets her to hire her. I don't know. Like I definitely think it's like, like I said, I think it's a movie that's probably a lot better than people probably remember. But at the same time, more than anything, it's probably not the movie that people think it is, because the marketing was so, like, how do you sell a movie like this? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Cherry 2000, check it out, everybody.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll stay in that post-apocalyptic weird sci-fi realm with my next one. And I'll go to a very recent discovery for me. So this is kind of, again, sometimes I'll just kind of fall down strange rabbit holes online, and I don't even remember how I got to this poster, but I found a poster for a movie, and I just saw that, and I was like, I have to see this movie. I'd never heard of it, and tracked it down. Unfortunately it's not a movie that has any current physical release, but you can find it online. You can find your ways. You want to check out the old YouTubes, for instance. But this is so we're gonna visit our old buddy Albert Pune.
Oh yeah.
So people, listeners of the show might be very familiar with Albert Pune, a very prolific B-movie director. Directed films like Alien from L.A. and the 90s Captain America, Doll Man, a bunch of like the Nemesis movies, Mean Guns. You know what you're getting into with an Albert Pune movie. This is pretty weird even for him. This is a movie called Radioactive Dreams from 1985. So you know this one, Goat?
I've heard so much about it. I've never come across it on cable or videotape or nothing. No,
that's the thing is, like I said, I had to find means to watch it. Now I think this is definitely one of those films that I want to champion so hard. I really want like a label like Synapse or Vinegar Syndrome or Severin to find their way to this. So what this is about is it's post-apocalyptic sci-fi comedy. It's about a nuclear war that breaks out in the mid 90s, and these two men played by one of them is George Kennedy, and the other one is an actor whose name is going to totally escape me. But they basically see the nuclear war coming, and they hole up in a bunker in a mountain with their two sons. So they each have a son, and the four of them go into this bunker. And these guys were clearly, you can get the sense that they never kind of outgrew when they were used in the 50s. They're still really they use 50s slang. They bring the bunker is filled with all their like old 50s detective novels. And they're very into like, all that like Raymond Chandler and Mickey Spillane kind of stuff. And eventually they set out, the dads set out on like a trek to go find who caused this nuclear war and why, leaving the two boys behind. So these two young boys are left to raise themselves in this bunker. And you kind of get this time jump, and now you catch up with the two boys grown up, but grown up only they've raised themselves on all these 50s detective novels that they have. So they talk like 50s noir characters, and their names are Philip Chandler and Marlo Hammer. And if you're into, noir fiction, you'll understand that their names in this are tributes to Philip Marlowe, Raymond Chandler, Mike Hammer, either authors or characters from that world. So they're played by John Stockwell, who people will remember from Christine, and what else?
Everything.
Oh, my science project. City
Losing It with Tom Cruise.
Yeah. Even in Top Gun, I believe. So he's one of them, and then the other one, interesting enough, I already mentioned him earlier, is Michael Dudikoff.
Oh yeah.
And what's really fun about this movie, I mean, I'll talk a little bit more about what's happening in the plot, but for people who are very used to Michael Dudikoff as just like the American Ninja guy, and that the string of kind of very just like you said canon kind of action films he made, he is so goofy in this. Like this is like the most comedic character he's ever played. So John Stockwell is like the straight-laced one, and Michael Dudikoff is the very over-the-top goofy one. Like I said, they eventually decide to go out, leave the shelter. They've got this kind of like old, classic car. They dress in the clothes they have are old 50s, suits, and they talk in the old 50s slang. They're very into swing music and everything, and they head out into the wasteland to see like what the world is like now. And then it becomes very Mad Max-ish. What they find is mutants, roving gangs that look like that typical 80s post-apocalyptic punk gang kind of thing. and they end up getting involved in this kind of hot potato game with the keys to the last remaining nuclear bomb. So there's one more nuclear bomb that was never detonated, and they come across this woman who has the key to it, the key that can be used to set it off. And she's trying to, they don't know what she's trying to do with it, but they get involved with her, and that gets them involved in this whole thing with all these various parties who are trying to take that key. There's not much more I have to say about it. If there is like a downside to the movie, it's that at a certain point they end up in this kind of what is like now a city. It's called Edge City, and it's like where all the gangs live, and it's kind of this like underground city. There's some fairly interesting stuff in there. They go to this like post-apocalyptic dance club. There's gangs of cannibals in there that capture them. But the movie probably spends a little bit too much time there. It really kind of does. The middle of the movie kind of like grinds to a halt a little bit. But then you get into some pretty cool stuff where you just find out there's actually like these giant mutated. I don't even know if they're supposed to. I could never figure out if it was supposed to be a dog or a rat. But it's just gigantic now, and it'll pop up from under the ground and eat people in this city. And that's actually like a really cool like practical puppet. There's these kind of two like mutated mutants who are like running one of the gangs and trying to get their hands on the key. And just, it's just this, the concept of the movie is so weird. And it's just like this bizarre mix of like this, the 50s based characters into this like post-apocalyptic world that even when the movie can get a little slow or when some of the jokes don't land, it's just one of those movies that's always like designed to be a cult hit, right? Because it's just so bizarre. They're kind of constantly entertained by it and kind of like, wow, I can't believe this movie exists. So I know, like in recent years, it's definitely played. Like people have been there's like prints of it traveling around and playing at different like kind of revival screenings. But man, I would love to see a good physical release of this, just because it's just so strange and it definitely deserves to have more of a following.
For sure. I mean, it must just be one of those weird things where somebody financed it who normally wasn't in the movie business. So, like, there's a lot of movies like that happen also with popcorn where, like, these people finance movies and then they're not really in the business later on. So then that's why the rights are, like, because, like, I mean, sometimes I you got to take it with a grain of salt, like some of the box office stuff, like, on Wikipedia, but this was a real movie. Like, it said the budget was $3 million and it grossed $7 million at the box office. Like, usually those type of movies are... get somewhat of a, especially in this day and age, Blu-ray.
I thought maybe it was like a music thing because, there's a lot of music in the movie, but then when I was looking at the songs and stuff, it's not like any big artists,
right.
So that, it can't be really that either. Yeah, but yeah, I know. And it's like a lot of the music is kind of like 80s new wave music. So that's like an interesting contrast too with like their 50s based personality. So it's just a really bizarre hodgepodge of different genres. And that's exactly what makes it interesting. I'm sure you're with me in loving that kind of stuff, right? When someone just takes multiple genres and throws them in a blender.
And also too, Albert Poon, he's a wacky guy, and like unfortunately some of his later movies you can see where his wackiness kind of went overboard and out of control. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like he was right, really hitting in the zone with this one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
I know the VHS release was Vestron, so here's hoping that maybe because I know there's the Vestron Blue label now, so maybe, but who knows?
Which tiny tidbit right here. Good news. People thought that label was dead, Trev, because they hadn't put anything out in about a year, but they just announced 2 more titles, so hopefully.
And not only that, but did you see they like really drastically lowered their price point too?
No, I didn't know that because I was looking for Dagon recently and. Pretty much all their stuff is out of print. I don't think it's out of print. It's just sold out, and because of the pandemic, a lot of people there's basically a backlog. There's a lot of stuff that's getting rare right now that's not even officially out of print. It's just they can't get more copies in the pipeline. So hopefully, when whatever demand, supply, whatever, I would love. I'm just curious though, because with those Vestron ones, you really need the slipcase. I'm not even a slipcase guy because 99% of the time the slipcase is the same as regular cover. So Screen Factory, I really don't even care if I get the slipcase, honestly. But with the Vestron ones, you really need it because it's literally the only thing that has the silver and says Vestron on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I noticed. That initial wave of Vestron releases, there was a lot of ones where I was like, well, I would maybe take a chance on that, just or I'm not super into the movie or haven't seen it, but the price point always kind of scared me off because they were very pricey. Yeah. And I noticed that the 2 new releases, which we should mention, are Little Monsters and Shivers. They're both coming in with just a retail of $15. So
wow.
I guess they're really trying to get more competitive.
Recalibrate. Yeah, because I stayed away from some of them too, and then like they got marked down later on. Because most of the ones that I got picked up later down on markdowns. But oddly enough, because I'm like a super like whatever sleuth for low prices, Trev. Oddly enough, the two places where even in their heyday when shit was expensive, the two places where I got mine where I was able to actually get good deals was actually the number one place was Bull Moose, which people don't know. I feel like it's becoming more popular, but it's I think they're from Maine. It's like an actual chain of physical stores, but obviously they sell online too, and they usually have. It depends on what company's product you're looking at. Some stuff they're the same as everybody else. Some things are a little bit higher, but for a lot of stuff, especially a lot of the really super niche, like some of the boutique labels, you can find their stuff very competitive, and it's free shipping. It's free shipping if you order over $30, I think, and there's no tax. It's like the only place I still buy from online where there's no tax. And oddly enough, I was able to pick up some Vestron shit on the cheap from Walmart.com, which I'm not like a Walmart shopper in real life, but when it comes to movies, like literally the only thing I buy from them is movies. And sometimes they have some weird low prices there. So if you're ever desperate and you're priced out on a super, expensive release, check out those two places. You might get lucky. But yeah, I'm pumped for Vestron coming back. So I'm going to roll on with my number 2 recommendation. And this is a movie that I was begged to cover this for years. But as far as I knew, it didn't have a physical release. I could be wrong. I didn't have any way to rent it. So this is why we never covered it. But back on the early days of the movie Graveyard, my main man, Corey G, baby, he wanted me to watch Real Men really bad. And I just saw it literally recently. This was another pandemic watch, and I saw it. It was on, what was it on? It's still on Stars, I think. So I was like, whatever, I'll watch this, man, and see what this is. Because it stars Jim Belushi and John Ritter. Love both those guys. Obviously, John Ritter no longer with it. I was like, I'll give this a watch, see what all the Corey G hype was about. This is a fun movie. This is a good movie, but I gotta admit, the thing that makes this movie stand out, Trev, is so bizarre. It's so goofy. It's so weird. I can't remember. Were you telling me about this too? Have you seen this?
No, actually, I haven't seen Real Men.
Yeah. So basically, this is just all it is. It's like the movie starts out. There's some like CIA dude who's like, or maybe he's FBI. I'm not sure. He's going into the woods to make a deal with some aliens that are supposed to come. And, like, he's carrying literally a glass of water. You don't know why. You don't know what's going on. He gets shot. He gets killed. The aliens never come. Basically, we enter John Ritter. He's like a normal, everyday dork who, like, everybody walks all over him. Like, literally some bullies down the street steal his son's bike. He tries to go get it back. These young toughs beat him up in his own neighborhood. And he kind of just makes up an excuse like, oh, no, it wasn't really your bike that they had, whatever, But he's like that type of, like, adult nerd. Like, Trev, like, whether it be high school nerds, college nerds, or adult nerds, the wimpy nerds were such a major character in 80s movies, weren't they?
For sure, yeah.
Yeah,
nerds and punks.
Yeah. So anyway, he gets wrapped up in this cockamamie plot of these aliens coming, and then, like, the thing that I really love about this movie, Trev, is there's, like, a whole intro action scene where there's, like, everybody, all these secret agencies. It's basically like a secret agent movie is what it is. They're all after the deal to I think it's like a map or something to get to where you need to meet the aliens, because the aliens are going to give us, like, all this otherworldly technology and shit, and all they want is a glass of water, turns out. So Belushi has to kind of rope in to help him get this mission done, this nerd John Ritter, and they go on this whole thing, and John Ritter tries to become a badass, but it's hilarious, middling results. But I mean, there's just nonstop shootouts, car chases. There's literally I'm not shitting you, there's a clown fight where they have to fight a gang of clowns in an alleyway. Like, this movie isn't so good as much as it's so coked up. Like, it's so coked up. I can't believe this is a real movie that existed and was made and starred two very recognizable people. So just on the sheer curiosity, freak show aspect of it, because it's kind of what you think it is, the way I'm describing it. It's not really a shit show, but it's just the whole time you're like, what the hell's going on here? So for just the bizarreness of it, I would recommend Real Men.
Cool. Yeah, that's another one that I was always, like, very aware of when it was out. and I'm sure I probably passed it on cable a lot, but just for whatever reason, maybe I'm willing to bet I was probably like in that, like, I'm too cool for a Jim Belushi phase, around the time when it was out, because it was always like the kind of like, oh, he's the lesser Belushi,
Yeah.
And there are still times when I feel like that, although like more recently in recent years, he's become a much more interesting actor and taking very interesting chances. In fact, rolling into my next one, we keep getting like weird, like, so you did Cherry 2000, then I had a post-apocalyptic one, and we keep having like these weird overruns because you just did one starring Jim Belushi. Well, he recently appeared in the revival of Twin Peaks as one half of the Mitchum brothers, and the next movie I'm going to do stars the other Mitchum brother, Robert Knepper. So I'm here to talk about 1987's Wild Thing.
Oh, yeah.
Before I go any further, yes, I know that in recent years we found out that Robert Knepper is not a good person in real life. I'm very aware. That's unfortunate, but, art from the artist and all that. So Wild Thing is directed by Max Reed and written by John Sayles, the great John Sayles, who sometimes, I think there's like two kinds of John Sayles fans, right? There's the people who only know John Sayles for the very, the very legit kind of dramatic work he does. And then there's people like us who love him because he wrote Piranha and Alligator and The Howling.
Right.
And that batshit insane unused Jurassic Park 4 script, which you can still find online with the dinosaurs using machine guns.
Right.
Yeah. So this is this would be another in his, strange genre fare. In fact, this movie, you've seen Wild Thing, right, Goat?
A long time ago. Yeah. Like, more than anything, Trev, it's that poster that's burned in my memory. You remember that? Yeah, for sure. And then also, I rewatched it for this, and it has such a Larry Cohen vibe to it. It feels like it really much feels like kind of the kind of movie he would have made. Just so what it is this young boy, who has there's these two hippies that are traveling across the country. They're with their young child. And they pick up this hitchhiker. The hitchhiker asks them to like take him into the city, and it turns out he's involved with drug dealers in the city. And the drug dealers kind of hijack the van they're all in, and apparently, something has gone wrong with this drug deal he's been involved in, and they end up murdering the two parents, a crooked cop and the main drug dealer. And the young boy, he's hiding underneath the back seat of the van at the time, so they don't see him, and he manages to escape. And he runs off into the city. It's an unnamed city. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be New York, but it's never actually named. So it's, Anytown, USA. But he ends up... They could just get by calling it Edge City if they wanted to.
Yeah. But he ends up getting taken in by this bag lady who teaches him, she teaches him how to talk and how to live. And she basically tells him that he should be wary of blue coats and white coats. So she's talking about cops and doctors, how they're both, people you need to avoid. And then you go into this like cool montage where you see him growing up and kind of learning everything from others. So he learns how to steal food. But then there's like a karate school nearby where him and his bag leader are staying, and he'll go and actually watch the guy do karate lessons. And just by watching him do it, he kind of learns karate. He'll watch TV through people's windows or at the window of a TV store, and he sees, like characters on TV using a bow and arrow, and so he learns how to use a bow and arrow. And essentially, you do this another time jump, and now it's a very young Robert Knepper in one of his first films playing this grown man now, young man who has basically become this urban legend in this city. The bag lady that took care of him has passed away, and he's basically like this modern day Tarzan, an urban Tarzan who patrols like the ghetto area of this town. And, saves women who are being attacked. It's kind of like this figure that'll swoop in on a rope and save people, shoot his bow and arrow. And he's just like, it's Batman-esque, right? Where he's an urban legend, and the people in the street will say like, no, you know about Wild Thing? And everyone's like, no, Wild Thing doesn't exist. And then Kathleen Quinlan shows up, young Kathleen Quinlan, as a social worker who's been assigned to a local, like a home there. And she ends up getting attacked by some thugs one night, and Wild Thing saves her. And so then she's on this like kind of, quest to discover who this man is and, what's his story. And she's kind of, it's a typical thing. She's kind of falling for him. And they started this like bizarre relationship because he's very obviously socially backwards and talks in broken sentences. And then the other backdrop to this is at the same time, the main villain is Robert Davi, the great Robert Davi.
Oh, yeah.
Is this like crime lord who controls everything there, and it turns out has had a hand in the murder of Wild Thing's parents. And so Wild Thing is like discovering finally the people who, because he remembers seeing them, so he remembers who killed his parents, and that becomes like kind of a revenge story. Very goofy film, but that's what's great about it. You know, it's definitely the kind of movie that it just kind of screams 80s. But it's also cool to see, like, you know, a movie that was clearly trying to create this new hero. Yeah, so I'm not sure if this Max Reed ever directed anything else. I didn't really look into it, but what's interesting is a lot of like the shots in this film, even if you just check out the trailer, you'll notice I kind of wonder if Alex Proyas had seen this, because some of it looks like it might have inspired The Crow. There's just some there's some cinematography things going on here that kind of gave me that vibe. But yeah, it's a fun like comic booky movie. Obviously it's not a comic book character, but it feels like it would have been like a small like indie comic or something. You can almost sense that maybe they're trying to get a franchise going with this, and it obviously didn't take off. But I don't know, there's just something fun about the idea of like an urban Tarzan, right? And it's like this, it's always fun, the idea of like these kind of urban heroes like Darkman and stuff like that operate in the seedier areas of the city and are really trying to just protect the downtrodden. And yeah, it's Robert Knepper again, whatever. But
well, no, I gotta say though, Trev, you kind of blew my mind when you brought his name up, because I'm only aware of like maybe like last 15 years of Robert Knepper. So like I know Robert Knepper is like obviously this older guy than he was in this movie, but I know him as like this kind of greasy, weaselish kind of B. He always plays the villain in the movies that I see him in, like almost like a slimy Lance Henriksen type, like almost how like Lance Henriksen is in Hard Target. So when you said he was in this, and I looked up the photos from the movie of him as Wild Thing, it kind of blew my mind seeing him in this mold. I'm very curious.
It did for me too, because in my head, like I felt like that I had never, I felt like I discovered and didn't know who Robert Knepper was until Prison Break, right? Like when he was on that show. And it kind of blew my mind, because this is a movie I saw when I was a kid, and like to realize like, oh, I had seen that guy way before, right? And I just didn't realize it. But because then, like you said, he does this where he's like the hero, and I don't really see anything else he does for a long time. And then you just go into this realm where like he only plays scumbags. Yeah. And he really does have like, I mean, he kind of has a scumbag look, right?
It's very his modern day.
Yeah. When I found out he was a real life scumbag, you're kind of like, yeah, that makes sense.
You're like, I could have called that.
Yeah. But no, this is a fun movie, like, you know, it's in that John Sayles genre vibe. It's a fairly thankless role for Kathleen Quinlan, but she's pretty good in it too. Another Kathleen Quinlan is another actress I think people don't realize how often she actually works in like genre stuff.
Yeah.
I think sometimes people just think of her as being in stuff like Apollo 13, but if you look up her filmography, she's in a lot of like horror and sci-fi.
I just did a podcast yesterday about the Twilight Zone movie, and she's in the Joe Dante segment. Yep. Yeah. She's awesome. She like I kind of like seeing her in that again kind of reminded me, because for some reason in my mind Kathleen Quinlan I usually go with the Doors movie, which I love her in. But yeah, you're right about the whole genre thing.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a fun one. There is like Olive Films put out a DVD and Blue of it that are maybe a little more expensive than they need to be, but it's available there, and you know, it's a cool one to check out. It's one that I think actually could be remade, I think, and maybe done like even a little bit better, but it's just strange enough to be worth a look.
Probably more of an audience, strangely enough, for this movie now than you know, at the time that it came out. I mean, because exactly the way you're describing it, it totally sounds like a you know, an origin story, literally.
Yeah, for sure. Or it almost feels to like, or like a pilot, right? Like this could definitely be like a TV show, you know? Yeah.
So I'm gonna be hot on that. And like the two companies, because everybody, you know, is head over heels with some of these boutique levels, Trev. But the two companies that for me have been lifesavers in terms of putting out stuff I really wanted have been Kino Lorber and Olive. And Olive is like even way smaller than Kino Lorber. And yeah, I know what you mean about the Blu-rays being pricey. Fortunately, that's kind of par for the course with these smaller companies. It's really hard for them to stay afloat. They have to charge more. But and thankfully, Kino, you can usually get sales, but I hardly ever see any huge sales on Olive. But yeah, Olive has a bunch of shit I need to get. So yeah, I'm going to be looking forward to this movie. See if I can get it on cable somewhere first. If not, I'll track down a disc, because it sounds awesome. And my curiosity is beyond piqued. And talk about a forgotten movie, Trev. Like, when I glanced at the poster, I'm like, oh my god, this thing was around forever and ever. video stores and whatnot, I always saw this cover, and like I never, like I don't think I've ever seen it all the way through. Another movie that was kind of ubiquitous around that time, that not that it's a similar movie at all, but it kind of reminds me of that, is like remember Brother from Another Planet?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. It was like that type of oddball thing. But yeah, rolling along, number 3. I won't go too much in depth. I just wanted to talk about the premise of this movie. So this was another, recent lockdown watch. And it really, I was like, oh, this movie has some cool people in it, like I'll give it a watch. And it really blew me away with like kind of how interesting, how good the acting was, and how heartfelt it is. It's a 1986 little drama called Just Between Friends, with Mary Tyler Moore, Christine Lottie, and Ted Danson. Were you familiar with this movie at all, Trev?
No, I wasn't until you put it in the list you sent me, and then I kind of looked at it a little bit, but not one I've seen. Yeah,
so it's really unusual in that basically the story is Mary Tyler Moore and Ted Danson are married or married couple. I believe she's an author, and kind of like in her spare time, she does a lot of aerobic stuff. So, and she's like really good at it. Like Mary Tyler Moore is like so buff in this movie, Trev. It's crazy. Like she's in skimpy leotards, everything. And like this woman, besides being very lean, like she had some muscles popping out all over.
I don't think that's a sentence I ever thought I would hear. Mary Tyler Moore is so buff.
She's so buff. I wouldn't have fucked with her when she was in this type of shape. But anyway, like, yeah, so she kind of, and then there's kind of like, at the beginning of the movie, you kind of don't know where it's going, because it's following Christine Lottie, who works for a television station for a news department. And she's a reporter who's trying to get a more prestigious, like, desk anchor job. So you're kind of like, oh, well, how does this all, like, whatever. But then you realize kind of what ties this movie together is Ted Danson is having an affair with Christine Lottie. And then through a really, like, it's kind of one of those movies where what I like about it, Trev, is as a viewer, we're 2 steps ahead of the characters, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So we kind of watch this whole kind of crazy thing unfold, where basically Mary Tyler Moore and Christine Lottie become friends. She invites her over for dinner, and like even though Christine Lottie knew she was dating a married man, she had no idea who the wife was. So there's this great scene of this like dinner party where it's just like, you want to talk about awkward tension, where Christine Lottie realizes what's going on, and also Ted Danson walks in and his mistress is like in the middle of his house. It's really crazy. And without going too much into it, basically, like she's trying to, like, they're trying to keep this secret, whatever. And Christine Lottie feels so bad because she actually was friends with, the wife of the guy she was cheating with, all this shit. And, like, basically, you just get thrown a curveball about halfway through this movie where Ted Danson, he's on assignment somewhere for his job. He's, like, a scientist. And I can't remember if it was a car crash or a plane crash. But anyway, he dies suddenly. So you're like, oh, shit. So then there's, like, this thing of, like, the 2 women remain friends. And obviously some shit happens. We're going through some of Ted Danson's things. Mary Tyler Moore finds out. And then the rest of the movie plays out kind of like, these 2 women, like, they have this connection. Are they going to remain friends? Are they going to whatever? And it's also, this is a great performance by Mary Tyler Moore, because there's so much depth to her character, realizing, like, what her marriage really was and how much she didn't know about her husband or whatever. I mean, I just can't recommend it enough. Like, it sounds like kind of a stodgy movie, but it's really not. There's a lot of humor in it, and, like, a lot of the rebound part of the movie where they're both recovering from the death and the things are coming through. Like, there are some lighthearted moments, so it's not like drudgery and sad. It's not like a tearjerker by any means. I mean, it's not a tearjerker. It's just more fascinating in the drama and stuff. So I would definitely recommend this movie for anybody who, just really likes to see a movie where it's like, in this day and age where everything's a sequel, a prequel, a remake, and everything going in, I think this is just a great piece to discover some completely unknown original characters and, like, how good they pull off the drama in it. So I definitely give a strong thumbs up to Just Between Friends if you see it on your local cable or streaming or wherever.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, looking at it now, it definitely has a strong pedigree, too, right? Because I saw that the guy who wrote and directed it is the guy who created the Mary Tyler Moore Show and the Munsters.
Yeah.
And then just hearing you say that it's, like, such a strong performance from her, I mean, obviously, like anyone, like, around our age, I'm familiar with Mary Tyler Moore, but definitely has more of a TV personality. Mm-hmm. And like, you know, like I certainly have seen Ordinary People, but if you like beyond that, and you know, like, well, Flirting with Disaster, I haven't really seen her in a lot of movies. So it's cool to think that, you know, I can check this one out and see more of her little dramatic heft, you know.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because for me it was really actually Flirting with Disaster that, like, you know, and I saw that as whatever, an older teenager, I think, around the time it came out, and it was really that movie. I love that type of quirky independent movie, and the character she played in that really opened my eyes up to be like, maybe Mary Tyler Moore is you know, something a different kind of person and talent than, you know what I mean, than I thought she was, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But
not to say that she didn't have chops on like her show and stuff, but just, you know, you would think that's like all she does, you know. So
right. And again, for this movie coming out in 1986, there's like really nothing about it that like dates it at all, aside from there's like the one character who is always recording his daughter's like whatever baseball games with a VHS camera. But I mean, other than that, there's like, it's so weird that you can see a movie that's like whatever 30-something years old that's so timeless. Just everything, like this story could happen today. It would be the same emotions, the same characters. So yeah, it's a good watch.
Cool. Well, unfortunately, I don't have any natural connection from that one to my next one, so the streak is broken. But I know that you're excited about this next one, so that'll have to do. So my next one is one that I think both you and I really desperately want a new release of, and that is 1986's Out of Bounds.
Yeah.
So this is this cool like little crime action thriller starring Anthony Michael Hall. I remember, I can't say I remember because I would have only been like 5 or 6 when this came out. But I have vague memories of like the awareness of this film, even when I was that young, being that this was like, what is Anthony Michael Hall doing in this, right? Like, so this, and then looking into it now, it definitely was like this was his, like this was his effort to break away from the John Hughes Rat Pack comedy, where he was just kind of always getting stuck as like the nerd, right? And this is a film where he plays this like Iowa farm boy who decides to move to L.A. With his brother. And when he gets to L.A. at the airport, his bag gets switched with another one. And it turns out that the bag he has now, this is a pretty cliche, you know, you've seen this happen a million times, but the bag he has now is just full of heroin, which belongs to this drug kingpin. And the drug kingpin wants it back. And to I'm not spoiling, this is going to sound like a spoiler, but this is like very early in the movie. The drug kingpin kills his brother who lives in L.A., who he was coming to live with, and is now coming after him. And so it kind of becomes this cat and mouse game with the two of them. And the other kind of main character worth noting is he met this girl on the plane, introduced herself and kind of told him where she works. And since she's literally the only person that he now knows in LA, he goes and tracks her down, and they become the duo to this film. And that's the great Jenny Wright, who I just had this huge crush on from Near Dark. And, you know, she was also in like The Chocolate War and things like that.
Talk about an unsung talent, man.
Yeah, for sure.
So good.
Even have you ever seen I, Madman, the horror film she made?
Yeah, dude. I was one of those people. By the way, everybody who's out there enjoying your I, Madman Blu-ray, I was the one that made that happen. Because I bought. You know what happened, Trev? I bought that DVD a month later. The Blu was announced, and let me tell you, I was more than happy to buy that Blu-ray again.
Oh, well, and I'm one of the fools who did not buy the Blu-ray and was like, I'll get around to it. And now it's gone out of print and it's like super expensive.
Oh, that sucks.
And I'm kicking myself for it. So I'll probably just end up having to get that cheap DVD that you got. But
full frame, enjoy it. Yikes.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this is a really fun one. So, I mean, I've talked about this before. I love, so like one of my favorite things are just any movies set in like New York in like the 70s or 80s. And that's also true of LA, particularly like LA in the 80s films. There's just something really cool about it, especially like when there's certain directors really can capture like the seediness and the nightlife of LA very well. Yeah. It's just like really cool. There's like, Susie and the Banshees are actually in this film. There's like a club scene where you get to see them perform at kind of like, you know, they're at their height. And just, like it's been a while since I watched it, so I can't remember how convincing I find Anthony Michael Hall in this role. But I think like from what I can see, looking back at old reviews, kind of the thing of the time was people were kind of like laughing at him for trying to break out of that mold. And what's interesting is that now we know he really accomplished that to the point where now I think he's more thought of as kind of like a tough guy a little bit. He can definitely pull it off more. And it's just neat to see that he early on he was young, and even when he was that young, he knew that he had that in him and was trying to get away from it. But this is definitely just one of those fun, simplistic but entertaining little crime thrillers with somebody out of their element, fish out of water, small town boy in a big city having to suddenly deal with like the horrible crime of LA. And then you got Jenny Wright as this cool punk girl who would have been exactly the kind of character I would have been obsessed with and in love with when I was younger. So yeah, definitely one I would like to see a blue up at some point.
Yeah, definitely my little bit of 2 cents on this film. I love this movie, and I honestly just love it because I'm an Anthony Michael Hall fan. Like this, like you said, this definitely was the movie. Like it totally would have fit in the trailer if they would have been like, "And Anthony Michael Hall, as you never seen him before."
Yeah.
But to be fair, like how you said, like people kind of ragged on him a little bit. I think people like saw like the preview for the movie and had it in their idea what it was supposed to be like, what his character is supposed to be like. He's actually supposed to be a aw shucks naive farm boy thrown into the deep end. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I mean, yeah, like I can't criticize his role too much. I mean, either way, he went on to be a fine actor. And like you said, if you know him in real life, I knew somebody who met him a handful of times and said like you can't really throw a sideways joke around Anthony Michael Hall, he'll take offense. You know what I mean? So it's kind of ironic. But yeah, I love the guy. I had this poster hanging up on my wall for many years, probably like a good 5 or 6 years, pretty much the whole time I lived in LA. And one day, one of my most surreal celebrity sightings was seeing the guy who played the drug lord. Was it Jeff Kober? I think that's his name. Yeah, seeing him at the post office. And he looked very much like he did in this movie in terms of dress and his whole hair. I mean, he was obviously older because it was like 20 years later. But I was like kind of walking in. He was kind of walking out. He kind of looked at me for a second. Like I think for like a split second, he thought I was somebody he knew or whatever. Or maybe because I was just looking at him. But yeah, like I love that guy. And I know he was in like Sons of Anarchy and shit later. But like I would love to see that guy play more scumbags. He's freaking awesome. But yeah, I need something. I would even take I hate to say this to lower myself to the standard, Trev, but I would take a standard definition DVD at least of this movie. Something. Give us something.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, you can rent it on streaming services, but and you should if you haven't seen it. But yeah, I agree. Like even if something like that came out, I'd probably snatch it up because it's definitely one I have fond memories of. And I always do like that moment where like those actors try to like break out. Sometimes it's successful. Like this to me is like the successful version of, and then the like non-successful version is. Do you remember when Patrick Dempsey did Run?
Oh, I love Run, dude. I have a laser. Really? I have a laser disc of it, but my damn laser disc player broke. Yeah, I need Run.
See,
too.
I'm not a big fan of Run. I just remember like that to me was like, what are you doing, Patrick Dempsey? Because he to me was still like he was the lover boy and Can't Buy Me Love guy, right? And I didn't think I didn't think that movie worked as well as this one does, but.
Well, I'm not going to lie. I remember seeing Run at a matinee with my mom, and I don't know what it is, Trev, because you watch that movie, and it's just like any other fast-paced movie. Something about that movie, Trev, I think that was the most I don't know why. Maybe because I was young or whatever, but I was on the edge of my seat that whole movie. And I was somebody who normally wouldn't get carried away with emotion too much watching a movie, but something about the frenetic pace of that movie, especially the shopping mall scene, I love that movie. And as far as your Patrick Dempsey criticism, I'm more into the other star of that movie, and I think you know who I'm talking about, Drew.
Of Run?
Yeah.
Kelly Preston?
Yeah. She's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, by the way, one last tiny tidbit on Out of Bounds. I still have the one sheet somewhere. I hope I can get a house where I can get all my posters up. That is one of the coolest posters from a graphic design.
That painted one?
Oh, yeah. Like the silver really and the background, of the painting of the cornfield and shit. It is awesome. I bought mine around 04, and I picked it up for probably $20 or less on eBay. I know posters don't go for that cheap on eBay anymore, but if you guys, have kind of like a retro thing, or you guys are, I see a lot of people on Facebook, Trev, that are kind of movie poster collectors, and they snap them in and out once a month or whatever. If you're one of those type of people, that is a good poster to pick up. Another one that really pops, looks good on the wall, and is almost in a weird way, like you said, like with the LA nightlife and shit, is the No Man's Land with Charlie Sheen. That's a great graphic design poster too.
That's what you're going to get now is they're going to announce an Out of Bounds Blu-ray, but the cover is not going to be that poster. It's going to be some stupid Photoshop job of like, one of the scenes in the movie or something.
They'll fuck up and they'll do like the background floating heads of Jeff Kober and Ginny Wright. And then they'll like really screw up and take like a picture of him from like Weird Science and put it on. maybe if they get lucky, we'll get the cover where he has the bra on his head.
My favorite thing, I'm sure you'll notice too, like when DVDs first came, right, and there's just like millions of DVDs, right, and stores were just like so many small companies put out DVDs, and there was always that move to like companies could suddenly buy the rights to like the early films of all these stars. And so you'd have like someone like George Clooney, right? And someone would put out like a new DVD of like Return of the Killer Tomatoes, but they'd put a picture of like ER era George Clooney on the cover.
Yeah, they're like he's so mature. He's the movie star you know and love. And then you watch the movie and he's like some like long haired gangly fuck with like no screen presence yet. Yeah, I know the tricks for sure. All right, I almost feel like that was one of my picks, Trev. Just because I love the movie so much. But yeah, I have another pick coming up. So this one, you even mentioned this guy earlier, and the us caretakers here at the Movie Graveyard, we love our boy Larry Cohen, don't we?
For sure.
And this is like almost like a more, even though it did recently get a Blu-ray release, I don't hear anybody talk about it even still. But this is a more obscure Larry Cohen joint. This one was called Special Effects from the mid-'80s. Can't remember if this was 84, 85, somewhere around there. This is a pretty cool movie for anybody who kind of likes, like little trippy inside baseball type movies on movie making. But basically he's teaming up here with Eric Bogosian, who's like, I don't know. Are you a fan at all of Eric Bogosian, Trev?
Yeah, I like Eric Bogosian. I think he's, it's not like you don't ever go see anything because Eric Bogosian's in it, but he always brings it to his roles, even as recently as Uncut Gems,
Shit, I still gotta watch that, man. I have that on my digital account, but I need to watch it. But yeah, I got into him when I was more in college, and I had to find like what do you call it, like monologues to do in acting classes. Mm-hmm. And I seen some of his like one-man show shit on I want to say IFC or maybe Sundance. So I really got in, and then like the movie Suburbia came out, not the Penelope Spheris one, but there is a Eric Bogosian, directed by based on Eric Bogosian's play. The movie is directed by Richard Linklater. That was like one of my like long lost gems, Trev, is Linklater Suburbia finally, like a couple months ago, got one of those like little goofy MOD DVD type deals from Warner, and I finally picked that up.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
But as far as like his outside stuff, obviously, where Bogosian's just acting, I think obviously his real tour de force is Talk Radio, directed by Oliver Stone. But as outside of that, this is probably his best movie. So special effects, Eric Bogosian plays a kind of gritty, very much cinema verite, masturbator type of film director. And he has a film production that gets shut down, some funding, some shit goes wrong. So he's like very edgy, he's very whatever. He kind of has like this cool New York apartment where it's like really almost like a lair and shit. And basically, he has like a hidden camera. Like, if I remember right, it's like hidden behind like a plate of glass that looks like a mirror or some shit like that. So he always records, like when he bangs girls or whatever. He's like that type of sleazy guy. And he gets a hold of this girl who's like a like they kind of set up that she left her husband. She's like one of those ones that like leaves like the whatever cornfield town Trev to come to New York to be a big star. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And like he's kind of like boning her, or whatever, and like his dark side is whatever. He's just a creepy guy, whatever. He ends up killing her on camera, and he's like, oh shit, whatever. And then he kind of gets fascinated that he kind of inadvertently made this snuff film, and then he's like, oh, I have this footage of this snuff film that I accidentally made. He gets rid of the body, he does all that kind of shit, and he's like, oh, what should I do with it? So he actually goes out and finds another girl that miraculously is like the twin of the girl that he killed. But meanwhile, while that's going on, the ex-husband of the first girl comes and is like, figuring out like where was Mary Lou or whatever her name is, where's Bobby Sue, whatever, like looking around doing the detective work. We got a little boy at home she needs to come be a mother of, and so there's some good Larry Cohen sleazy tragedy in here. But meanwhile, basically the plan that Bogosian concocts when he finds that he find a second actress that looks just like this girl is he's basically going to create this horror movie involving this actress and whatever, and he's going to create a fictional story of it. But his evil master plan is the death scene of this actress in this movie will be the real snuff footage. So she already looks like the girl, but he gets the hair exactly like, he gets the matching angles and shit, so all the footage will cut together. And then obviously, in great Larry Cohen fashion, there's always like some fisticuffs to end it up and everything, Trev. So this movie blew me away. And also like the girl that plays like the double roles is if I remember her name right, I think it's Zoe Lund. It's the girl that like always collaborated. 45? Yeah, Abel Ferrara. Yeah. So like so it's got that great sleazy, I want to say this is like 84, 85, but it feels even earlier, like maybe late 70s, early 80s. It even feels either earlier and sleazier than it is. But yeah, I definitely recommend this movie. It's a lot of fun. It's twisted. Got that great, old school Larry Cohen feel going for it. So yeah, check out special effects.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember at the time, like that always getting this movie confused with FX.
Right? Yeah.
Which obviously not the same thing, but this is one special effects has been popping up on HBO or one of like the HBOs recently. So
yeah, and I think it was with that new to throw like another like even like let's go down the rabbit hole of getting shit confused even more, Trev. I know what you're talking about. You're talking about FX with Brian Brown, right?
Right, yeah.
So there's FX with Brian Brown, then there's special effects, and then there's literally effects starring Joe Pilato, which is also
that's the Savini one, right?
Yeah, the Savini where it's like, oh, let's get some murderous shit on camera, or, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Like, yeah. So like around that time, like there's definitely a whole rabbit hole of these weird movies that like all those movies are based around the title, at least. Obviously FX with Brian Brown's completely different, but in a way it's not because he is a special effects man. But there was a real surge for that type of creativity at this time point.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah. I actually don't think I've seen that except for bits and pieces. So that's another one I'll definitely have to check out. I'm trying to fill in my entire like Larry Cohen filmography. I saw just recently. Have you seen Perfect Stranger, the Larry Cohen film?
No.
Okay, I haven't either, but I noticed that that's one of the labels just announced that they're about to release that too. So yeah, we're starting to fill in his whole filmography on Blue at least.
We kind of need it too, because I feel like on high def, because I actually still just have the regular DVD of special effects, which I just like blind bought out of a Big Lots a few years ago for $3, and it actually looks very good. But I want to get the Blue. Like I kind of love like with like Q the Winged Serpent and shit. Like there's some like we talked about it before. You even referenced it as like that Larry Cohen look, especially in high def, man. That gritty, cheap, independent, like almost cinema verite, grainy look. Like it's beautiful, man. Like that's how I love movies to look like. And Larry Cohen, even his shitty Salem's Lot, I've watched in quarantine, and that movie was awful, but it's beautifully shot. It looks great.
Yeah. Cool. So my next one, my final one, is going back to, I know someone you and I are both a fan of because we did a whole episode about him. So we're going to go back, we're going to revisit our pal Dennis Hopper.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going all the way back to 1980, so just making the cut here. But and unfortunately, mostly forgotten, but I actually believe about to be rediscovered, directorial effort from him called Out of the Blue. So are you familiar with this one, Goat?
No, I don't think so.
All right, so I believe this is his third directorial effort, and the story on this one was that he was hired to simply be an actor in it, but about halfway through the filming, or maybe I think they had started filming, I'm not sure how far along they were, but he was asked to actually step in and replace the director. I don't know what the actual specifics on that were, but he hadn't directed since 1971 with the last movie, and this was definitely the point in his career where people were very aware of his issues, and he was kind of definitely being overtaken by them very often. And you can find some stories about how the people who worked on this film talk about how he could be very difficult. but he was still Dennis Hopper, and they trusted him enough to say, hey, do you want to take over the directing? He said yes, but only if I can also rewrite the script to kind of fit like my vision a little bit more, and they agreed. And he crafted this film called Out of the Blue. So what this stars Linda Manns, who had this really like it was. So I'll get into like her a little bit more in a moment, but and why she's kind of a big part of why we're about to rediscover this film. But people might recognize her from, she has a small role in like The Wanderers, and she was the lead in Days of Heaven. And at this time, like people really thought she was going to be the next big kind of like young female actress icon. She's getting a lot of acclaim for all these films. And then she just kind of left the business. She came back with a part in Gummo, so I'm sure you would recognize her from that. But really, she's pretty much just stayed away. But this was a film that brought her a lot of acclaim. So Out of the Blue, she plays the main character. She's a character named Cindy Barnes. Everyone calls her CB. And her dad is Don Barnes, played by Dennis Hopper, who is just a kind of an unrepentant alcoholic. And one day they're out driving, and he's driving drunk and just slams his truck into a school bus full of children, kills all of them.
Damn.
And he ends up getting sent to prison because of that, obviously. And she's then left, at home with her mom, who also has some issues. They both remain very loyal to Dennis Hopper. They're very excited about when he's coming back, and that's where the film picks up, where we're just days away from he's going to be released from prison, and kind of they can pick up their life again. And the whole thing is she's obsessed with Elvis Presley, or he got her into Elvis Presley, and that's kind of her icon. And of course, this is at the point where Elvis Presley has just recently died. So she is kind of really bummed out about that. She talks about how Elvis Presley like betrayed her and has left her. And she often talks about committing suicide to go join him. She has now gotten heavily into punk rock. So this is like a kind of an interesting, sign of the times, look at the punk rock scene as seen through her eyes. She talks about Johnny Rotten and Sid Vicious. In fact, if you look at the poster of this, it says the tagline of the poster is "She's 15. The only adult she admires is Johnny Rotten," which I think is a funny tagline because it's very much like, "Oh, what a delinquent," right?
Not even John Lydon and Johnny Rotten.
Yeah. But yeah, so it's really just this like kind of, it's a slow-paced film in that kind of Dennis Hopper way. It's very leisurely. I've seen interviews with him where he actually called this kind of a spiritual sequel to Easy Rider. Because it really is just kind of following her as she goes through everyday life, like waiting for her dad to get back, and then we follow when he does come back into town. What's interesting is this is definitely one of those films where kind of no one is likable, but that's the point, right? Is he's just showing us this very realistic slice of life of this really fucked up family in this small town. Because once Dennis Hopper's back, he just instantly starts drinking again, slips right back into his same problems. The mom is like so forgiving of him when she shouldn't be. And we're just seeing the toll this is really taking on the Linda Manns character, on CB. And then as the film goes along, you kind of learn more and more about the past relationships of this family and how much more dark and twisted it might be than we realize. Raymond Burr has a couple scenes as the psychologist that is assigned to kind of oversee this young girl and kind of try to figure out like what's wrong with her. Apparently he had more scenes, but Dennis Hopper ended up just like cutting most of them, and I guess they did not get along during filming. So it's got a very interesting backstory. But the reason I said that, so out of all the films I talk about, this is the one I legit think is like the best movie. I think some people, some younger listeners, if we have a lot of those, might watch this and be put off by the pacing of it, because it doesn't definitely feel modern. But if you're into that kind of like character piece kind of stuff that Dennis Hopper is doing this time, you'll love it. But just recently, Chloe Sevigny and Natasha Lyonne, the actresses, they've been spearheading this attempt to get this movie kind of back out in the ether. Because what happened is this movie was shown at the Cannes Film Festival in 1980 and went over big time. And it was a huge hit in Europe. Like everybody in Europe loved this film. And for whatever reason, we've seen stories like this a lot. The American distributor like totally dropped the ball on this. And it basically like got a really crappy release in both Canada and America. And so like on this side of the pond, right, it just was like not much attention was paid to it. But Chloe Sevigny has said that Linda Manns, even though she only did a few movies, is like her acting hero. And so she's been like spearheading this attempt to get this movie back. And they actually kickstarted and crowdsourced a full HD remaster. that was actually supposed to debut this year at the South by Southwest. Unfortunately, we know that was canceled because of COVID, but that means the remaster is done. I'm imagining we'll get a blue of it very soon. So I'm excited for that because it's just this cool like peek back at a little forgotten Dennis Hopper directorial effort, a cool look at like the punk attitude of that time. And just like a really strong, central performance from this young actress who you will watch this and go, man, I really wish she hadn't left the business so quickly. I wish she'd stuck around because she's pretty powerful here.
Yeah, I was familiar with the title of this movie, but honestly, I didn't know anything about it. And yeah, I'm looking at the Kickstarter now. Like they raised $62,000. I'm hoping that it doesn't say out of whatever, it just says that they raised $62,000. So I'm hoping that's was enough that they got to do all their stuff that they're going to need and everything.
Yeah, well, it was officially on the slate for South by Southwest. So it at least got to the point where they have a print ready to go. Now whether they raised enough to get it distributed and everything beyond that's what I don't know. But here's hoping,
Yeah, because it looks awesome. Because this is like the type of movie that I would probably buy on Blu-ray, sight unseen. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sharon Farrell's in it. I like her too. But yeah, Linda Manz is weird because it's I know what you mean. I've read especially around the time because I was a big fan of Gummo when it came out and reading all the articles I could about it and the kind of excitement about her coming back and all that. Even though she did have a small role in it and stuff, but I'm just so curious why they were, and I'm sure probably this movie in particular was a huge part of that. She is awesome, but I'm curious, did they think she was going to be the next Jodie Foster or something? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that was the thinking, and I think you can kind of get it because but like I said, between this and Days of Heaven, she kind of came out of the gate really strong,
Yeah,
and even I like her part in The Wanderers.
Oh yeah.
I actually got kind of, I like Chloe Sevigny, but I was reading an interview with her when she was talking about her attempts to rescue this film, and she was talking about Linda Manz, and she was like, well, Linda Manz only made 3 movies, 2 of them are masterpieces, and then she also did The Wanderers, and I was like, hey, come on, The Wanderers, I'd throw in that camp as well,
Yeah.
But I was So in just those 3.
Was Gummo one of the masterpieces? Because
well, I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
It'd be weird to be she was also in this masterpiece where you can see me ripping duct tape off my nipples.
No, she was only talking about her early ones. But I know she said that when they worked together on Gummo, that's when she was really excited because she got a chance to talk to her all about this film and everything. So
yeah. No, this looks like an awesome movie. Yeah, I would love to see it. When was the last time you got to see it, Trev?
A couple years ago. I can't remember how I heard about it. I'm sure I probably I think I actually did find it because I was watching The Wanderers and I liked her character in that, and I was looking up the various actors in that, and I saw that poster that said the Johnny Rotten thing, and I was like, what? I'll watch any movie that's on the poster that says the character's in a Johnny Rotten just because that makes me curious. And so again, I had to kind of track this movie down. And at that time, I just found it was on someone had put it on YouTube. I don't know if it's still there or not, but that's how I watched it at the time. And then just recently, I started reading the articles about it getting this HD, resurrection. So
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It looks like it's successful, and I hope there's some kind of tangible release so we can all see it. Because they had some comparisons to a standard def version and what they did with the restoration. It looks awesome. Mm-hmm. So was that the last movie on your list, Trev?
It was, yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought because I'm on my last one. I'm like, damn, this went by fast. Mm-hmm. So this one is a movie, literally there's a handful of movies, Trev, that I watched 30, no exaggeration at all. I watched 30 or 40 times when I was a kid on cable. One of them was the Jim Carrey movie Once Bitten. And the other one I think I've probably seen the most in my life is this movie called Gotcha with Anthony Edwards and Linda Fiorentino. So this is a fun one on a lot of different levels, especially I think for a younger person like I was when I saw it. So the movie opens up, and this is what really captured my imagination. And just what a weird hook for a movie, really. But anyway, the movie opens up with a bunch of guys on a crowded college campus, and it looks like they're hunting each other, and they're pulling guns out, and they're going to shoot each other, but they're actually doing paintball. And they're playing this little game called Gotcha, where I guess they kind of exchange their own student IDs. So this week you're hunting this person, that person. It's pretty exciting the way they do it with this opening, introduction and whatnot. and we kind of set up Anthony Edwards. He's kind of cool, but he's kind of a nerd. He doesn't get like a lot of women and stuff, but he kind of is a cool guy. He's got like a leather jacket. He's got feathered hair and stuff, and it's young Anthony Edwards, of course. So basically, he's going with his best buddy. They're going on an Eastern Europe kind of like what do you call it, like a backpacking trip. They're going to like all the cool places, Berlin and all this kind of shit. And basically, let me see. I always get this guy's name wrong because he has a couple names, but I really like the guy that's with him in this movie. He was in A Nightmare on Elm Street. He got hanged by Freddy Krueger. Yeah, I know his real name that he likes to go by now was George Jesus, but he had, let me find it. Nick Corey was his fake name. Like his Nightmare on Elm Street name is Nick Corey, but his real name is George Jesus. So anyway, these two guys, and like George Jesus is like, or Nick Corey, however you refer to him in your own mind. He's like the stud teaching Anthony Edwards, like, we're going to pick up all these girls, man. And like he's really getting it in. He's like banging girls nonstop. So finally, he's more quiet, more reserved, whatever. Anthony Edwards goes out for coffee one night on his own, and he gets picked up by a very young, very boyish, short haircut Linda Fiorentino. And I have to say, this is probably the only movie I can think of where it's a woman with a really short haircut, really came. And I'd say this is came off as really sexy to me. And this movie is, that's not just me, my masturbatory 10-year-old whatever fantasies. This movie, obviously you probably don't remember, Trevor, because you're a little bit younger than me, but this movie, the advertising and everything, this was sold as a sexy movie, Trev. Sexy. like all the trailers were all about how hot Linda Fiorentino was.
It's funny because I'm looking at the poster now, and I'm familiar with Gotcha, and that's not the poster I would have expected. Where it's just all about her legs and she's in the bed with her legs up, and he's standing there like, wow, whatever. Because I think the DVD that I have, the cover is different, and this just it's not out yet, but it just got announced for a Blue finally, and I'll be waiting. I'll probably end up pre-ordering that son of a bitch. But I just love this movie because, this sexy German girl, and they make a big deal how sexy her German accent is and all this kind of shit. So, he has to go through this chase, and he goes through the DDR. She talks him into helping him smuggle a package for some money and stuff. And he knows there's some funny business and all that, but he whatever, he goes along with it because he's all into this exciting foreign woman that's wrapping up. Well, obviously it's a perfect Cold War movie because there's all kinds of spy shenanigans and evil Germans after them, chasing them all around, tourist monuments, shooting at them. So long story short, he's like, why is this movie called Gotcha, though? Such a terrible name for a movie about a kid getting caught up in some spy shit. Well, eventually he makes his way back home to the U.S. It turns out he accidentally, she hid some top secret micro fiche in his film little thing, the pictures he took. So he doesn't realize he smuggled out some top secret shit. It's basically a MacGuffin chase. And so, now he's back in L.A. and typical 80s style, the whatever spies are now in L.A., the German spies are in L.A. trying to kill him. So he gets his boy Nick Corey to go get the homeboys. So it's a great convoluted in chase where he's got Latino gangsters on his side helping him out. They go through this whole elaborate chase. He finds out Linda Fiorentino is not even German. She works for the CIA. She's just some American woman that used the shit out of him. And at the end, he goes back. He ends up on the college campus, and all the guys are they got real guns, but he ends up going back to his paintball shit. But instead of paintball, he steals some tranquilizer darts. So it's some cool shit where he's shooting people in the neck with tranquilizer darts. Obviously, it all ends up in a great action climax on the campus of UCLA, where they filmed totally 80s, totally LA, totally Cold War, totally sexy femme fatale movie. This movie has so much damn shit jam packed in it. It's a perfect 80s time capsule of a fun. There's some good humor in it too. There's one scene where he has to dress up as a kind of new waver German pop star and dress up with his band to get through the border and shit. Some funny shit happens too. But yeah, I cannot highly recommend. Probably one of my, if not my number one, and definitely in the top 3
films that I've watched over and over and over. Even this DVD, I've worn the shit out of it. I've watched it so many times, so I love
It's funny because I remember back when I was young, I remember the vibe of this film was there was always a lot, probably because there was also like the gotcha toys and everything.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of, there was, and like some of the, video covers, there's always this idea like that's just the paintball movie, right? Like that's the movie about paintball.
Exactly.
And then I think a lot of young, like people like me would be young and be like, oh, I guess I'll watch that fun paintball movie. And suddenly like, what? There's like a lot of plot in this I'm trying to follow, where suddenly there's like a lot more happening than you expected. Because I remember not realizing it was like a real spy movie the first time I watched it.
And it's such a weird thing because later they had the whole gotcha line of things. So this is what they don't mention the toys, but I mean they do briefly. But on Wikipedia it says Gotcha later spawned a game for the Nintendo Entertainment System for use with the Zapper light gun called Gotcha the Sport, which I did play that game. A line of toys based on the game and film was released. And the toys, I don't know. I actually had one, but I picked it up way later at like a garage sale, Trev. It was like a kid-friendly version of paintball. And there was actually a store that like had like really old stock of toys and shit. So I was able to buy some of the cartridges. So the Gotcha thing, it was a cool toy. Like you would put this like round cylinder, like it would open up, like you would pull the gun open. Like it was like a good two-handed gun. Like it was a good size. It wasn't just like a pistol. So you put this little round cartridge in there, Trev, and then like you kind of like pull it open and cock it like you would almost like a shotgun, like every time you wanted to shoot. And it would shoot these little tiny, like real tiny, about the size of your thumbnail, I'd say, these rubber darts that were like, in these little paint capsules. So like me and my buddies played around with it once or twice, but unfortunately, because I guess these little cartridges have been sitting on the shelf for a while, like the paint was pretty dried out, even though it would technically shoot out or whatever. But it's so weird that like a NAS video game, a line of child-safe paintball products would all spawn from a movie where like technically they only played Gotcha the paintball game in the first like 10 minutes of the movie.
Right, yeah.
So yeah, everybody watch Gotcha if you haven't seen it yet. So have you seen that movie like anytime recently, Trevor? Or has it just been years and years?
It's been a long time, but I mean I probably within like the last 10 years or so I've seen it.
Okay, yeah. So you're familiar with it.
Yeah, no, like I said, like there was that initial like it not being what I thought it was gonna be when I was younger, and then who knows, maybe when I watched it last, it was because you talked about it or something. But
I know I talked about it, and it was like one of those ones before Corey bailed on the podcast where like, what's the next 3 movies we're going to do? Okay, Death Wish 3, Gotcha, and this, and it just never happened. So yeah, but I definitely like made a point to check, and that's what I mean. Like going back now and realizing it is a spy film, and then like Linda Fiorentino was gorgeous back then. I mean, well, not saying she's not now, but I'm just saying she was gorgeous in that film. And honestly, she probably is. You can't find her, dude. She's gone.
Yeah. Well, and I remember like I don't know. I'm sure you did too. I started to hear more and more about how she wasn't the easiest person in the world to work with. Yeah. So yeah, it seems like she's not someone you would necessarily cast if you want an easy time making your film, perhaps. but yeah, no, it's. I remember I'm not sure. I wouldn't say I like it as much as you, but I had fun watching it last time.
Yeah, it's a wild romp. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's pretty much all you can say, man. Like we really both kind of ran the gamut of genres and even budget. Some of these movies were well known at one time. Some of these movies, like you said, like out of the blue, it was obscure even when it was new. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we both agreed that we could probably do this again because I think we were both having a hard time, excluding some films. So
for sure, we could definitely do definitely at least one more, maybe 2 more of 80s films, and there's definitely we could do a show or 2 about forgotten 90s films. But yeah, I had a blast doing this. Trev, I want to thank you for bringing this topic up. To me, it was a great idea. Especially in this day and age, like right now, like I've been watching a little bit of new stuff, but I'm mostly watching a lot of old stuff, but I'm really discovering a lot of new shit, and it kind of blows me away. Like, me, Trev, as much of a 80s aficionado, hardcore, whatever I am, like you can still discover new shit. Like it's shocking.
Well, that's the fun thing, and I mean that's true. Like there was so much crazy variety in the 80s, and I got to give it up to, in particular, like Amazon Prime has thrown like a lot of just kind of like random stuff up that you haven't heard of, and you can find a lot of cool things on there. But yeah, I agree with you. Like I've been kind of a more nostalgia kick myself recently.
Yeah.
And discovering things. Just the other night on Amazon, I watched Vendetta, like a 80s like women in prison movie that I'd never seen before.
Nice.
Yeah. And then there was a couple other films I watched thinking maybe I'd talk about them on this, and decided to just tuck them in my back pocket for next time. But yeah, it's I think our whole point was there's so many, everyone knows Ghostbusters and Back to the Future and Goonies and stuff. Right. And so it's nice to go back and be like, when we were kids, man, we went to that video store and those shelves were just packed of stuff.
Yeah.
Now you go into these lists and those covers like come like roaring back to your memory, and it's fun to be like, well, let's give some extra love to the ones that have been forgotten. So, yeah.
For sure. And I'm really pleased where we're at right now. In whatever you want to call this, the twilight, the whatever, physical media, it's pretty much blowing me away that how some of these are getting new releases, new remasters, like for the first time in 30, 40 years. So it is a good time to sit back and reflect, because some of these flicks they're going to be available now for a limited time in these pristine editions. And, like the case of I, Madman, it's like it sucks because you can't buy everything at once. But at the same time, like some of this shit is really comes and really goes quick. So yeah, always good to keep your head up.
Yeah, it is interesting at a time when every article about physical media is about how it's dying, but meanwhile, like you said, there's all these labels putting out the most obscure stuff possible. Yeah. Physical media, like that's the strange irony, but I think it is because the people left buying physical media are the people like us who want those like weird obscure things we remember from when we were younger, because ultimately you don't need to own the Avengers because you're always going to be able to find it. But you want to get your hands on to the movies you love, because these aren't going to pop up on Netflix as often. So
exactly. And I think that was, and then obviously there still are some little good few reservoirs here and there in the streaming world of where you can find these things. But yeah, like with what streaming was 10 years ago, I really thought it was going to be this treasure trove of like stocked of everything obscure, and it turns out no, it's actually the most obscure shit now is coming out on physical media sometimes. So yeah, you never know. So Trev, I want to thank you for not only joining me, for coming up with the awesome, cool topic, obviously, and as always, we always got to direct our fans, especially our most X-rated fans, to go check out what podcast.
That'd be Days of Future podcast, my show all about the X-Men with my buddy Joe. We've been on a little bit of a forced quarantine hiatus, but we're just about ready to get ramping back up. And I'll also give a little shout out to it's not either of our podcasts, but our buddies Matt and Bird have their podcast Kaiju Transmissions.
Oh yeah.
And I recently recorded an episode with them that I'm very happy with and very proud of, where we went through the entire Starship Troopers franchise.
Holy shit! I gotta listen to that.
Yeah, so I'll tell people to check that one out, because that was another one where I pitched it to them, because I'm a very big advocate for. Everyone talks about the first Starship Troopers, which I do love. We all loved it. But I also wanted to remind people that there's a whole franchise there, and I think those sequels are a little undervalued a little bit. So we talked about the whole thing, the whole shebang.
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get. I discovered it like literally like the last day of the month that it was playing, so I wasn't able to like record it and get the whole thing. But did you guys talk about that new animated sequel they did?
Yeah, there's two of those. We watched both of them and talked about both of them. And I won't spoil our overall thoughts, but I'll say at this point there are 5 Starship Troopers films, including 2 animated ones, and I don't hate any of them. I think they all have a value to them. So
yeah, I love Starship Troopers, man. It's kind of a shame that the original movie couldn't be a hit when it came out, but in a weird way, I'm kind of glad the afterlife that it's had. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it has that cool like Tremors afterlife, right, where they're able to just make these like lower budget entries that have very little pressure on them, and can just be kind of these like fun little B movies. So definitely check out Days of Future podcast, and check out Kaiju Transmissions. And just curious, Trev, because I'm very proud that here on the Movie Graveyard that we're about hit our 80th episode. But how many do you guys have of X-Men? It's got to be in the hundreds by now, right? Yeah, we're in the hundreds. Let's see. 100 right now, as we're recording this, we have 127 episodes.
Damn. And you guys started way later than this show did, so that's probably 120 over 4 years, 3.5 years,
5 years at this point.
5 years, okay. Damn, you guys are awesome. And obviously, like you said, because the whole world's gone crazy, but you guys have really impressed me with how you've kept up your recording schedule all these years. Like, it's really commendable. So I take my hat off to you guys. So yeah, so that's it. Obviously, we're happy you guys could join us and go down memory lane with me and Trev on these movies. Trev, I know you'll be back. We got some things on the boiler that we're kicking around, so you'll be back real soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's little Easter eggs in this episode.
If you listen hard enough, if you play a drinking game, and if you hear something more than 3 times, it could be a hint. So yeah. So anyway, once again, Trev, thank you, man, and we'll see all you crazy retro movie lovers real soon. Next time in the movie graveyard.
See ya.
You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows, visit electronicmediacollective.com.